Well, welcome back to Self Center, Be Real and Heal. I'm your host, Bree. I'm excited to be here bringing another amazing light and individual to the conversation today. I'd like to introduce everyone to Shawn Hendricks. I don't call it a chance encounter or a chance introduction. I I want to share, how we got introduced and got connected because I believe it was for a purpose and for a reason. And I still think there's more that I'm learning about why and how we got connected. So my husband works for a construction company, and we were at a work dinner with someone that he orders some materials from. And this gentleman, I had met him, I think only once before. And we started talking during the dinner about what I do and my nonprofit and how passionate I am about mental health and some of my goals with my nonprofit to do a mental health podcast and, eventual mental health app. And he kind of, out of nowhere said, I think I need to introduce you to my friend. And that was like all he said. And then he came back to it. I think when we were leaving, he's like, I really think I need to introduce you to my friend Shawn. You should talk with him. And the unique thing, as you guys will learn soon, all about Shawn's story and um, Chris, who introduced us, he didn't even know your story at this time. So
Yeah.
you had not told him. Um, so I don't really know what led him to, because you don't have like, it's not like you have this specific mental health battle or struggle. I didn't know if, maybe he had gone through depression, or maybe he is passionate about supporting mental health. Maybe he's an investor. Maybe he wants to, um, support in some way my dream or my vision, but he just felt that nudge. And I think sometimes those are some of the most unique and powerful connections that I've had in my life, are just those like little tugs to like, I need to talk to that person more, or I need to connect these two people. And you see something like beautiful bloom from it. So anyway, Chris introduced us via email, I think, or text message. We chatted, we set a time to like have a real like conversation, and still not really knowing what we were going to talk about, other than I'm like, well, I'm going to share what I'm working on and what I want to do and see if it's something that he could, support or contribute to or speak about, and share a piece of, his story. And we ended up, I think we talked for probably 2 hours that first day. Um, so I want to give Shawn a chance to just introduce who he is as a person first, and then we'll dive into his journey and his story. But, that day he shared it all with me, and we had really unique, interesting things that we connected on and that we kind of helped talk through with each other. He still is someone that will send advice and little notes of encouragement. And, I remember he's telling you about this podcast and being like, I want to do this. I don't know if I can do it. And you're like, I listen to a bunch of podcasts. I'm like, well, you're a step ahead of me. I don't even have time to listen to that many, but I want to tell people's stories and share them with others so that they can feel hope and feel inspired and feel less alone in what they're navigating. So I think you've had a similar pull, but we'll get to that in your story. So Shawn, introduce yourself just as a person, and then we'll dive into, your story.
For sure. Yeah, my name's Shawn Hendricks. I'm 44. I'm a father of seven. Have my lovely wife, Carrie. Um, I work at Walmart, the corporate home office. I've been here for almost 26 years.
Wow.
So since I was 17. It's been really good for my family. It's Northwest Arkansas is a great area to raise your family. Um, Hobbies, I love weightlifting. Um, I'm really into weightlifting. I get up at 4 a.m. every morning to train. And what I like to do, a lot of people like to listen to music and such whenever they train, but what I like to do is I'm a very deep thinker and I love to learn. And so if I hear a topic that someone brings up at work or in any other kind of conversation or just something I've been thinking about, I'll do a little research the night before and I'll find a podcast or something that I can listen to about that topic
Mhm.
the next morning. And so, but before I do any of that, whenever I get up, I go through my daily scripture. My goal is to go through the Bible in its entirety each year. And so that is a goal of mine. And so I kind of what I tell people is my goal every morning is to take care of my spirit, my mind, and my body. And that way I can be the best prepared for the day to support those who need my support.
Right. I love that. And you've encouraged me numerous times. Um, and as a mother of five, I mean, we can relate on our crazy households and schedules. And I know I've said to you, like, I just don't know if I can get up earlier. I want to. But there's always like unpredictable things that happen. You know, you wake up earlier. I used to think, oh, I'm going to wake up and work out early. I'm going to wake up and meditate. I'm going to wake up and read or listen, to something inspiring, or journal. And I like routine. I like to find that routine, but I'm so tired and I'm a night owl. And sometimes, I mean, my son comes in and climbs into bed at 3 o'clock and it throws everything off, or I wake up and the dog threw up all over the bed or the floor, or there's just always variables. But what's interesting about that, and we'll tie in a lot of things about our conversation and then how in the last few months and even the last few days, I've realized, wow, I forgot that that was the same between us. When I realized, I said it to my husband this morning. I'm like, remember how Shawn would always tell me to wake up early and I just couldn't bring myself to do it? Like I tried a couple of times, or I would try to start my day first in my devotional or in my Bible study. Um, I took a job where I'm teaching fitness classes at a gym recently. I used to do it years ago. I used to coach a pro dance team and led them in workouts and whatnot. So I've had 10 years off of that just in motherhood, and took it as a part-time opportunity to, I mean, I work out anyway a couple times a week. So it's motivational it keeps me on my, schedule and my regimen. It also allows me to inspire people, which I love doing. I love building people up. But my alarm today, because I taught at 6:15, my alarm went off at 5:30. So I forgot that like I'm actually doing that now. And you told me and you encouraged me to do it. Um, and I wouldn't do it on my own. So, this job and taking this opportunity and getting to coach the early class a couple times a week, it like it happened. Here I am. So now I need to
Yes.
like change that rhythm of when I wake up at 5:30, I need to read my devotional first and then go train. I got to add that in.
Yeah, some of what helps me with that is I have a home gym. Over the last probably 15 years, I've built toward having everything I need at home. So I'm very fortunate in that manner. So I
Yep,
mean, me getting up at 4, I'm walking in the garage, right?
that's
So
true.
so that's a big benefit that some people don't have. Um, and I grew up on a farm, so I'm used to getting up early.
Yeah,
As you know, if you grew up on a farm, during the summer it gets hot, and so what you do is you get up early, you get some chores done. Then when it gets to the heat of the day, you find some other things to do that's not out in the field or
right.
or whatever you're doing, and then you come back and finish up in the evening when it starts to cool down a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of been an early riser due to those facts.
Well, and I love the way you said, like, to think about your focus that early is spirit, mind, and body. All three of those things so important. And it doesn't have to be, an hour at the gym and an hour of, devotional. It's whatever you can fit in. So I need to. I mean, I obviously I'm going to the gym to take care of my body, and a lot. What I have noticed is I pray every morning on the way to the gym, just that I can be an example of light and grace when I walk in the room and have the right words to motivate and encourage and meet people where they're at in their journeys and connect with people. Um, so I mean, I'm in prayer, but I need to, I love that mindset of just focusing on those three things first thing in the morning to start your day. Okay, well, we haven't even like, given a bit about what conversation is going to be about. And I'm like beaming with happiness, even though it's like a hard story to share, but I want to, dive into it and get into, what you shared with me. I don't know that there's any way to like segue into it other than, can you tell the story about that day, back when you were 7 years old, what happened and kind of draw a picture for everybody, what your story is all about?
Yeah, I will say to start off, you mentioned whenever Chris first told you that you should meet me, um, he hadn't even heard the story yet. And so throughout my life, I've kind of shared it where I felt it needed to be shared.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've gotten a bit older and some of, talking with you over the past year is I'm starting to realize everyone needs to hear it.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know how many people will watch this, but I hope a lot. And I hope it's meaningful and I hope it gives good guidance.
Yes.
And so,
And I've
um,
I've started with Shawn where I've like messaged him on the side, like I have a friend who's gone through this loss, or I know someone who is having this struggle with faith or with hope, and he has offered to talk to them one on one. And I know you've shared it with other people. You shared it with Chris a few months later, and the next time I saw him for dinner, he was like, "I had no idea," like, and you knew before I knew, and what an amazing, testimony. But like you said, you found other people along the way, a friend, a neighbor, someone at the gym that you're like, I might need to tell this now, and that might help that person. And I do feel like, with this podcast, every episode that we're recording, my first one about postpartum, I put it out to the world 2 Fridays ago and then kind of closed my eyes and was really scared about the judgment and what people might think my intention is. Um, but the people that reached out to me, of course, family and friends applauding and supporting, but I had two or three people that reached out that I haven't talked to in years, or, a complete stranger that said, I heard this and, it impacted me. So that's the whole purpose of this. If it impacts but one person, it's worth it. But I know your story is going to impact so many more.
yeah, and I would say that's part of the reason why I was so selective on who I shared with. Because, one takeaway that I want people to have is I'm not seeking credit or I'm not special. And so that's one of the reasons why I was so hesitant to share so broadly for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't want anyone to think that, oh, well, Sean's just trying to get attention.
I can
Um,
relate to that
because
in so many
because
ways.
all, if, once you hear my story, I hope the way I tell it and the way it comes across to everyone is that, glory is to God.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with me. I am actually just fortunate that it happened to me.
Right. And that's the craziest part of it all is with so many of these stories. I like to ask that at the end, but like the fact that you just said it, like that you're grateful that it happened to you. And once people understand, the struggle and the pain and the, tragedy and it all, it like that's a powerful statement to say. And I've caught myself saying the same thing about I'm grateful for cancer. And the fact that I can say that 3 years later is um, it's part of my story, it's part of my testimony. And when you get through some of those hard things, there is light on the other side. So, Shawn, take me back to that day. You said you grew up on a farm. I know this took place on your farm. Um, where were you living then?
Yes.
Was
This was in Washburn, Missouri,
okay,
back in 1988.
okay,
It was a few weeks before I turned 8 years old. We were my father, my brother, who was 5 years older than me at the time. We were working up in our chicken houses. We raised chickens for George's at the time, and my mother had walked up from the house and said, "You guys need to come down and get ready for dinner." And so my dad said, "Hey, boys, we need to hustle up and get this stuff done and get down. Mom made dinner." And so as we're walking down, you can see some storm clouds starting to come in and stuff, and we'd been working in this chicken farm. And as hard as my brother and I thought we were working, obviously my father was working much harder. And so he was dirty. And, my mom did not like dirty people at the table. You go clean up before dinner. I spent all this time on the meal.
Yep.
You can clean up and present yourself. And so my father asked my brother and I to stop by the barn and throw a few flakes of hay out to the horses before the storm came in while he went and cleaned up. And so my brother and I, we had, it was roughly a 25 by 50 in length barn, and we had a rope gate in the front of the barn, and then there's a little concrete pad. And so what my father had always advised us was, make sure you throw the flakes of hay past the concrete pad because you don't want the horses to slip or anything and injure themselves. And so we started to throw out the flakes of hay, and I threw one and it landed on the concrete pad, which had happened many times before.
Right.
Nothing new. And so I go out there to move the flake of hay. And about that time, I mean, the thunder and the lightning just roared and it spooked the horses. And so they started running around, and I looked for entrance back into the barn, but they were running around the front of it. And so I jumped on some cattle guards that we had laying over on the side that was kind of out of the way, just to make sure that I was, safe and out of the way. And I found a clearing. And so I ran back into the barn under the rope gate, stood up, turned around, horse kicked me. And uh, I never blacked out or anything. I remember my brother helping me up, and uh, he's screaming and crying and yelling, and he's got my hand, and he's leading me out of the barn to the house, yelling for my parents. And of course, my parents run out, and they see everything. I can't see. I was kicked in the face, so I couldn't see. There's tons of damage. And this was again in 1988, and it was in rural America, Washburn, Missouri. There was no 911 to call or anything like that. So my mother, my father loaded me in a minivan that we had, and then my grandfather drove us to the nearest hospital, which was Cassville, Missouri, which was about 7, 8 miles away from where we lived. And along the way, my dad was holding me in towels because of all the blood. And I remember, I could feel the dirt on my face, and I could reach up and I could feel, parts of my skull that you shouldn't be able to feel. And my dad's asking me my name, my address, and everything. And hindsight, I realize he did those things because the last thing you want someone to do is go to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
especially with all that trauma, because they probably won't wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get to Cassville, Missouri, and obviously they're not prepared. It's a small town hospital, lots of damage. They were not prepared.
Right.
And so they called Springfield Hospital, Springfield, Missouri, which is about an hour away from there. And we're asking them if they could provide a chopper to come get me because it was so serious. And so anyway, one was out on another pickup of someone that was injured. And then the second helicopter that they had was actually broken down.
Of
And
course.
so they had to drive me by ambulance. And I remember going so fast. You could hear like I said, I couldn't see anything, but I could hear the light poles just whipping by. We were driving so fast. And it felt like we were there in no time. Not sure exactly how long that took. But during that time, they lost me several times and were able to resuscitate me. Well, when we got to the hospital, um, they lost me again. And that time is where the whole experience really started. But before I really tell that part of the story, I want to back up a little bit to my great grandmother, Emma, who, when my brother was 1 or 2 years old, she came to my mother and gave two piggy banks, what she thought were piggy banks. Funny story is they're actually cookie jars, but she thought they were piggy banks.
Mm.
And one was for my brother, and she said one was for the son that you will have
Oh,
in a few years. But she said, I won't be there to see it.
she said that.
Yeah, so I want you to
Yeah,
have it.
that's,
And so, now we can go back to this
yeah.
story. And
I didn't know that part before.
yeah, yeah. It's great. I
I
still
love
have
that.
that cookie jar,
Oh,
and I will have it till the day I die.
yeah.
I'm not a super sentimental person. People that know me know that. But that is one thing that uh, I have set up in a way to where nothing can damage it.
I love it.
And so, back to the hospital, they lost me again, and I was I realized I was in a dark tunnel. But way, way, way out there, I could see this light. And I can't really describe the light other than to tell you it was the purest thing that you can imagine. It wasn't like, these beautiful 2024 fluorescent lights or any of these things. This was just raw, natural, bright light. And if you read the Bible, what people will hear in there is God is the light, right?
Mm.
God is he's just pure energy. He is
Hmm.
light. And so and so anyway, I was walking down this tunnel, and I didn't feel injured, but I couldn't see anything other than that little light. I'm walking down through there, and I keep hearing this voice on the side, and I didn't know what it was. I wasn't scared. It was really an interesting thing on that matter. I was never scared. And I keep hearing this voice. And the next thing I know, I'm in conversation, and it's Emma. I can't see her. I can just hear her voice because it's pitch black all around me.
And your grandma passed away before you were born,
She passed away before I was born.
like
Yeah,
she said with the cookie jar. So,
yeah.
how
So
did you know it was her voice? You just knew.
I, you just
You
knew.
just know.
You just know.
Hmm.
And she said, don't be scared. And she said to the next time I see my mom, to tell her that it's okay. Um, and
Oh,
that she was sick in the hospital, and they called family to come visit. And my mom didn't make it up there in time. And what I didn't know until later on, that really bothered my mom for several years
yeah.
until I came back and told her this story that she said it was okay. And so that was that engagement, that conversation. And then I continued down the path. And as I walk through the darkness, the light just comes toward you.
Mhm.
And before you know it, I stepped completely out of the darkness into the light. And there was a hand. And it was Jesus. And it was one of those feelings of knowing someone your entire life that you've never met.
Like you were like
Uh,
starstruck, like, oh
you just knew who it
yeah.
was.
When you're
Um,
7 years old at this time. So you're not,
right.
I
And
have
my
to
family wasn't
constantly
even
remind,
going to church on a regular
we were not.
basis or
I didn't know
anything.
that either.
Yeah, so after that was when my family actually got into going to church. Um, but anyway, I step out of the darkness into the light to his hand, and he says, "I am."
Wow.
And and you can read through the Bible. He says, "I am." Many times in the
Hmm.
Bible. And so in during that time, he tells me about salvation and that he came to earth in human form to allow himself to be crucified so we could go to heaven. Because in the Bible, it tells us nothing less than perfection can go to heaven. He's the only one, right? None of us are perfection without him. He gives us his blood atonement is what gives us that. And and he talks to me about forgiveness. In his dying breath on the cross, he looks to the heavens and says, "Father, do not blame them, for they do not know what they're doing."
Right.
That is ultimate forgiveness.
Mm.
And so he explains salvation and he tells me, he says, you can go back and I can not guarantee you no pain and suffering.
Right.
Life is pain and suffering.
Right.
It's suffering and sacrifice. For everything you do, suffering and sacrifice. And he tells me, but you can be the hope and light for your family
Mm.
and hold them together.
Yeah.
Or you can stay here for eternity and suffer no more, but your father will blame himself.
Mm. Oh.
Where there's no blame,
Right.
'cause, it was a complete accident. So I chose to come back.
And I remember asking you this in our conversation. I'm like, were you thinking about it? Were you looking around? And you're like, I chose it immediately.
There's no thought. There's no thought behind it at all. You knew that was the right answer.
Yeah. Well, and I also have to know I try to choose a word for each episode, um, for each guest, a word that like I think of when I think of the person or their story. And I had a word chosen. And then I was telling my friend who was on the podcast that I recorded before this a little peek into your story. And I said, I don't know that I can find a good enough word. And she suggested something else. She suggested the word trust. Um, so I wrote it down. And then like right before we started, I was like, no, that first word came to me for a reason. And the word was hope. So you just said, um, you made reference to that word and I just like circled it on my paper. Like, of course that's the word I chose. And that you just shared with us. And we'll come back to that at the end, but
Yeah.
just affirming that everything is happening the way that it should right now. So,
Yeah, and then there was some other stuff that he
oh
had
yeah,
conversation with me that I forgot. That I
right. Like
just
there
at
was
that
more,
time,
more
there
that
was
he
more
told
to the
you,
story, but wasn't for me to be revealed to my, or it wasn't to be
right?
revealed to me until later.
Right. Because how long were you
But
in the like in the hospital for?
several weeks.
How long were you in, like, because this all happened when you were in a coma, right? Or do you feel like this happened in one of those moments where they lost you in
I know
the,
it was one of the moments that lost me. Yeah,
okay.
my parents ended up telling me that they knew something had happened because they were in one of the waiting rooms, and they said just a cold chill came
Oh,
over them. And so, at that time they thought I was gone. And the doctors, in talking to them, weren't real hopeful.
yeah.
And so, anyway, whenever I was talking with Jesus, some of the things that I took away when I came back.
Yeah. Because at
Uh,
that time you did remember a couple things crystal clear.
yeah,
Like
there
what?
was a few things I remembered that I didn't remember at the time, but I
Right.
remembered when I woke up. And a few of those things were read the Bible.
Yep.
It just over and over in my head, it was read the Bible. And it took me a long time to understand. And I think what it is if there's someone uh, that you know today and you're trying to get to know them better, you have conversations with them, you have
Mm-hmm.
conversations with people that know them, etc. But for historical figures, you read books, right?
Yep.
And the Bible is the beginning to end story of mankind. And so if you want to build a true relationship with God, you have to read.
Mm-hmm.
That is the way you know, and uh, that will build the faith. But the Bible is, it's not only true, it is truth.
Right.
I believe the Bible from beginning to end. But in my mind, it just kept rolling through my head that I needed to read the Bible, read the Bible. And so, like I said, now I try to go through the Bible every year.
Yep.
Um,
And we're going to keep talking on, I mean, we'll
yeah.
take a break in a moment here to do a fun thing. We'll come back to some of those other messages that came to you later on that you remembered,
Okay.
and some of the like that pull that you felt that we talked so heavily about in our conversation about like, but what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Um, but there was one other thing that you walked away from that, like what there were one or two other messages that you walked away remembering as a child. I mean, you woke up and you told your mom about Emma said or grandma said
Yep.
this right away, right?
I told her about that, which she completely broke down, and it was such a relief to her.
Yeah.
I told my parents about uh, Jesus telling me about salvation, that we needed to go to church, and that we needed to read the Bible. Um, and from that
And didn't he
point,
say, didn't you remember something about like, was there a message of like, make me proud or do something, do good, or some kind of a message that you were left with and not knowing how to decipher what that was
yeah, it was to be hope
to
for
be
people.
hope?
Some one of my goals is uh, I try not to take away, I try to add with
Yep.
everyone I meet. Life is hard, and we all go through things, so it's not
Mhm.
always been that. But it's always been something in me that I've desired for. Um, but one of the big things that came true later on that I remembered from our conversation years later was and family members, close friends, and everything knew this is from that time I had a real healthy fear of turning 30.
Oh yeah.
As a 7-year-old child, I had a real healthy fear of turning 30, and I didn't know why, but I knew it was related.
Yep.
And what happened was when I turned 30, my wife at the time asked for divorce. Um, and, divorce is devastating. It happens to many, many people.
Mhm.
But when I went to kind of gather myself and was praying, it popped into my head that something was going to happen to me that was going to be real hard for me to wrap my mind around. And when it did, I needed to seek in him.
Mhm.
I remembered the last part
You're,
of
yeah.
what he told me, and what he told me
And you're
was
like, that's right. I
his
know this.
introduction. Yeah, his introduction was I am. And at the end of our conversation was when you remember this and you go through hard times, seek in me.
Mm, wow.
And, at 30, from 7 to 30, we're all sinners. I was a ornery young boy. I made plenty of bad decisions. And whenever that happened, I still have since then, right?
Mhm.
I'm still a sinner.
Mhm.
That's why God came to us in the flesh and allowed himself to be crucified as the ultimate sacrifice so we could be cleansed and go to heaven.
Right.
Um, but, with that said, he said, seek in me. And so whenever I run into trouble, I do those things. I seek in him.
I love that. And I love how, I mean, you didn't remember that. You didn't talk about that. You had this fear in you of 30. But how loud and clear that message came through, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's like I knew this was going, like
Yeah.
he warned me, he told me, and prepared me for this.
And some
Wow.
people I've told that to have had a hard time. Well, if it's not all scripted, then how does that happen? Well, we have the Bible. It
Right.
has the beginning. God created everything. You have the middle, Jesus' crucifixion, and then you have the end, Revelations.
Right.
And so it's all right there anyway.
Right.
We still have free will and all of our choices to make, but He knows everything.
Hmm. Well, and that's an interesting, we talked a lot when we first chatted about forgiveness. Um, and I held a lot of I'm really good at forgiving other people. Um, and I have a tattoo on my wrist that I got last year when I got baptized. It's a cross and it says grace. I give a lot of grace to my kids, to others, to I'll always allow others to come back in, even if they hurt me. I'm always open to that. But I have a really hard time giving myself grace and allowing myself to feel grace from God. And so much of our conversation was so heavy on forgiveness. And you've helped me in my journey to like understand that more because I was really hard on myself for, my mental health battle and some of my other, struggles in my life. But you've really helped me look at forgiveness head on. So thank you for that. I
Yeah, and
wanna Go ahead.
sometimes forgiveness takes time, right?
Oh my gosh, it's a process. Healing, right or wrong,
Yeah,
is a
it's
process.
not always easy, but you cannot hold on to it.
Totally. It weighs you
Uh,
down.
and forgiveness of yourself and of others. you have to be able to do those things. Look at what Jesus
Right.
did on the cross in his last breath. That is the ultimate
Right.
forgiveness. But if we want him to forgive us, we have to constantly work on forgiveness
Yeah.
of what others have done to us and what we've, uh, been regretful for
Right.
ourselves.
I love that. Okay, we're going to lighten it up for a little bit and go into some easy breezy questions. This is just a fun little part that we try to do and to get to know our guests in a little lighter way. And I'm going to kind of rapid fire some questions. You can give a quick answer. You can give a little explanation if you'd like. And then we'll dive into the second half or the second part of our conversation because there's still more that I want to touch on. And, you still have a story. You have to get us from 7-year old, you turned 8 in the hospital, 8-year old Shawn, and to where you are now and how, what that, because this is what we connected on first was that mother, someone in your community that you could see and feel for, and your own experience of how you've learned to not just survive, but learn to thrive, right? Live to thrive. So let's do these fun questions, really quick things, little things that are kind of connected to me. Music just makes me feel alive, gets me through happy, sad, angry, all the stages. And so what is a song that speaks to you that's uplifting or gets you through whenever it comes on, or maybe you put it on when you need a little uplift? Is there a song that speaks to you?
Yeah, so I'm not huge on music. I traditionally will listen to country music, but there's one song that if I'm going through struggles, I listen to, and it kind of reiterates to seek in God,
Mhm.
and it's called God's Eyes by an artist named Dax. And it is part of the song is I've never saw God's eyes, but I've seen the devil's.
Mm,
And in the Bible, Jesus makes a statement and calls Satan the small g, God of this world.
mm,
And that song talks about all the craziness in this world and that you have to seek God.
mhm,
And so whenever I'm have any struggles or sometimes if I'm just, really excited about something,
mhm.
I'll listen to that and it brings out passion.
I love that. Okay, everybody's gonna have to check that one out. Um, okay, some other quick ones. Because my name's Bree and I'm from Wisconsin, the land of cheese originally. What's your favorite type of cheese?
Uh, I'm going to say mozzarella,
Okay.
and that's because it goes on pizza.
Yeah, you love pizza.
And
That's
I
right.
love pizza.
Love pizza. Love that answer. Hugs or high fives?
It depends. I would say if I'm just meeting you, high five.
Yeah.
I love the engagement. Um, but I'm a really deep person, and I can sense struggles with people,
Hmm.
and I'm always good for a hug on that.
I love that.
But I think a hug you have to show love with your hug.
Yeah.
My wife's sister, her name's Shatara, and she is one of those people that I cannot wait to see her because she gives the best hugs.
I love that.
So I just think when you go to hug someone, it has to be full of love.
I love that. And you're right. I've heard when you're hugging someone, don't be the first to let go.
Yeah,
Which if
yeah.
everybody knows that won't work out. But
It
you
drives
know,
my wife crazy because I will hug her
uh,
and she's
while she's in a
not always
hurry.
touchy-feely because she's in a
Yeah.
hurry. She's at
Right. I
home.
get it. My
Kids are
husband's a
always
hugger.
all over her. And
Yeah,
she'll be like, uh, are you gonna let go now?
I know. Oh, I love that.
I don't want to, but I guess.
I guess. I'm an awkward person. I have very if I feel nudged to like talk to someone or engage with someone, I do it. I say kind of weird things. I've hugged people in first meetings where I just feel like they need one. I actually at church last week, at church probably a month ago, I saw this woman sitting in the row in front of me and my husband, and she was crying. She was, touched by the message that day, was crying, kind of wiping away some tears. She was sitting by herself. And when service ended and everyone was leaving, I told my husband, I'm like, I really wanted to hug that woman. And I don't know what she's going through or what she was feeling, but I really wanted to hug her. And we talked about it. I brought her up maybe a little bit later that day. And this last week on Sunday, she was in front of us. I hadn't seen her in a few weeks. She was in front of us and she started crying again. And I like looked at my husband and I'm like, it's the woman that I want to hug. And he just switched seats with me, let me move right behind her. He's like, this is happening. She's going for it. So at the end of service, I tapped her on the shoulder and I just said, this is going to seem strange, but I was here sitting behind you a couple of weeks ago and I saw you crying and I just felt like I wanted to give you a hug. And can I give you a hug? And she's like, of course. And gave me this giant hug. And I just said, I don't know if you're going through something. And she's like, no, I'm just always moved by the message here in church. There's nothing. But she hugged me so hard. And then she said, thank you for that. And like, she said, maybe, I didn't necessarily need the hug. I'm not going through anything, tragic or sad. She said, but maybe you needed the hug. And my husband like laughed and he's like, watch her not sit in that row anymore. She's gonna because I know that I'm a little bit awkward, but I also am not gonna regret giving someone a hug that maybe needed it. Or maybe it was for me. I don't know. But
Great hugs speak louder than words.
seriously, that's the truth. Okay, one more here. Oh, two more. Finish this phrase. I love you more than, like I often will say, coffee or
To
cheese,
my to my family, I would say pizza.
pizza.
They would know, like,
They would know they are like,
I'm in good
wow.
standing with Dad right now.
That would be my husband's line too. If he said he loved me more than pizza. Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, last one. Best advice you've been given. I mean, you've gotten some pretty strong advice from, the big guy.
Best advice. Um,
But you
I
have
would
so much
say
knowledge. Like you listen to so many podcasts, you listen to so many speakers. I
I
mean,
would, I would say one thing. It's only advice if you really, really, really think about it. But realizing that life is sacrifice and suffering.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes people hear those words and they think, well, man, that just sounds terrible.
mm-hmm,
Sacrifice and suffering isn't always bad.
right,
I want a certain result from my workouts. Well, I have to make myself suffer a little bit,
right.
but it's for good. And so that kind of leads into, a quote from Jordan Peterson. And basically, what it says is that the hardest things in life, you will reap the most reward.
Mm,
The simplest things in life have the least amount of meaning. And so it ties back into the sacrifice and suffering. And it just kind of shows that, the most rewarding things out of life are sometimes the hardest.
right. Okay.
Going back to,
I was going to say
you
that's a great segue going back into, I mean, your story of like,
know,
that's where we need
going
to
back,
talk is the sacrifice. Let's talk through the suffering. What were those next few years like?
yeah, I mean, so going into that, from the time I was, essentially 8 is when I turned 8 in the hospital until I was 18. I think I had 37 major surgeries.
Wow.
I had to redo first grade because they thought I was going to have a learning disability. Uh, they wanted my parents to get a divorce and classify me as crippled
Yep.
in order to pay for stuff
Like to get
and
more.
insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of
That's
course, my mom
crazy.
and dad said, no way. And
Well, and for two reasons, I mean, he probably didn't want to give up on his marriage or just do that or get a
right,
divorce for that reason. But also, like you've told me, they were parents that were like never going to let you feel less than or
right,
like you had that you weren't fully equipped for this world.
right. Yeah, there were hard lessons, growing up with all those surgeries, and I lost my left eye. Lots of surgeries around that. I can't hear out of my right ear. Lots of surgeries around that. Lots of plastic surgery. I had titanium plates. My head was completely split open. So lots of surgeries. Some of those surgeries was because I was growing,
Hmm.
right? And they had to adjust things. But with that came stairs. I remember going to the store with my mom or dad and people staring at me.
Hmm.
That's hard. And, and I remember my dad, uh, there's no great way of dealing with those things. It's in the moment. No
Right.
parents prepared. And so my dad's thing was, look, son, life can be really hard.
Hmm.
And if you allow yourself to be a victim, the world will take advantage of it. You have to look for the good.
Right.
And, it's so true because if you look around, you will always, no matter what you're going through, you will always find someone that has it worse.
Right.
Doesn't mean what you're going through is not real. Doesn't mean it's not difficult. Doesn't mean there's not people that aren't going through that. But it kind of goes back to the story of Job. You saw all the trials and tribulations for Job, and essentially, um, Satan was making deals with God to strip all this away from Job, uh, his wealth, his land, his family, all these different things. And along the way, everyone was in his ear telling him to, just blame it on God, and he just refused.
Right.
And that was because the thing that meant the most to him was God.
Right.
And so then God gave it all back, right? And so, that's the one thing that Satan cannot take from you is God.
Right.
But as Jesus said, he does have some dominion and power on this world. He is the small g God of this world.
Right.
And so he can wreak havoc.
Oh yeah.
And so, that's what my dad was trying to get across to me was, yeah, I understand, son. It's not good, but you've got to move forward. It was one of those things. If you're not dead, you're alive.
Mm.
So make the best of it.
Right.
And so those were some really hard things to understand when you're a child.
Right.
Um, but you know, as I was growing up, I really noticed struggles and things that people were going through, and I've always kind of had that sense, and I've always wanted to, be supportive where I could. Um, but yeah, I mean, there was lots of, there was a point in time whenever I was a teenager, started finding interest in girls, and I would have the moments of, well, what is a girl going to want with me? You know, I'm damaged goods,
Yeah.
and you had to fight those. the devil's always trying to get in your mind and run you the opposite direction of forward. And so, yeah, I mean, there was lots of struggles, and there's some of those things that still, bother me a little bit
Right.
today. And I don't think you will ever get rid of all those things. I think once some trauma happens, there's a bit of it that will follow you
Oh
for the
yeah.
rest of your life, and you have to remind yourself that you are good enough.
Right.
Uh, God loves you, and you just got to move forward.
Right.
You
When
know,
you
and I would also say with that, I ended up with a gorgeous wife
oh,
and 7 kids.
right.
So, that part worked out, right?
Right.
And so, I think the devil's just always going to try to mess with your mind and
Oh
plant
yeah.
those seeds of doubt, and you just have to push forward.
I love that. You also talked to me about sports because you told
Yeah.
me with your surgeries, with some of, different for different reasons, and maybe you can explain that, but you weren't supposed to be active in sports and be on sports teams, right?
Yeah, so I had to redo the first grade,
Hmm.
and I wasn't actually able to go back to public school until about fifth grade.
Okay.
A little bit here and there, but it was very short term. And so my mom and dad had a couple of friends, and the wife was a music teacher,
Okay.
and she was able to come help tutor me some and bring homework and keep me up to par. Um, but along with that, my school, you could start playing sports in fifth grade.
Hmm.
And so when I went back, the doctors were like, not a good
No way.
idea. We don't think this should happen. And my dad's like, yeah, it'll happen. Um, it's our jobs to find out how to do it
Right.
the safest. But I'm not going to tell this young man. No, he wanted to make sure my spirit wasn't damaged,
Right.
right? That that young drive. And so I was into basketball, and they built some special goggles for me to wear,
Mm.
um, so I could play. And so I played, basketball through school. I ran cross country. I was always really, really skinny.
Yeah.
Um, and the best I can explain it is, I think, because I'm obviously not now, but the best I could explain it was I was going through so many surgeries.
Yeah.
My body was trying to heal versus grow.
Yeah.
So when I graduated high school, I was about 5'11", and now I'm over 6'2",
Wow.
and I was 135 pounds. And, I became a competitive power lifter, because one of the things I used to always tell my mom is, I can see it. I won't be skinny when I'm an adult.
Ah,
And anyone that knows me, uh, I would like to say, if Chris told you about me, he would say, this guy is the picture of work ethic.
no.
And so if I set my mind to something, uh, you're going to have a hard time stopping me.
Right.
And so I became a power lifter, and at my largest, I was 300 pounds.
Wow.
2 years ago, I tore my ACL, unrelated to weightlifting. I was actually throwing a Christmas tree into the woods from Christmas that we just had, and my foot slipped when I threw the tree. And
Oh my goodness.
the doctor said there was probably so much torque, and then the foot slipped at the right time, and it tore my ACL. And so since then, I've downsized a little bit, and I'm 230
Okay.
right now, but still lifting weights, 7 days a week.
Yeah, I
A lot
love
of
that,
it.
as a kid, like the doctor's like, no, he should not probably do
Yeah,
sports. He shouldn't do all this stuff. Not only did
my
you keep
dad
it
was not
cool,
having it.
he didn't have it, but you also didn't have it. You were like, I
No,
mean, look at you now. You're like, I mean, I don't, would a doctor be like, that's a great idea to do all this powerlifting and, I don't,
probably not.
right. But you're like, I don't know. I think you just, you're a fighter, like, and you're not gonna, um, your dad was too and instilled that in you. I mean, he was the one working through, I mean, maybe he wasn't building up your body, but he was taking care of your body in the sense of like making sure you had the surgeries and the proper support and, healing. But he was helping instill that spirit, mind, body focus that you focus on now every day.
Yeah.
Um, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, there were, I will say that, growing up, there was a lot of situations I didn't want to do it, you
Yeah.
know. I didn't, I was young, I didn't understand all of it, but I was just listening to, my dad. Sometimes it came across as a hard message,
Mm,
but he was doing the best he could.
right.
I'm very thankful, that I had the parents that I have. Um,
Well, and this is maybe we
but
can segue into, that part of what you've told me. And when we started talking just about, when you see other kids out there now or moms that are taking care of kids with disabilities, you felt this big pull and ki- kind of not knowing what to do, how to help.
yeah, that's always been a struggle for me is, I will see a handicapped child or something along those lines and it breaks my heart. I just want to fix them.
Right.
um, and
And you've
it's
said, and
hard
make
because
sure,
I understand,
right,
some of what they're going through. Not all of, like I said, you can look around, there's always someone that's got it worse than you.
right.
Um, but I have an understanding of some of what they may be going through.
Mhm.
And sometimes I see the moms uh, dropping their kids off at school, and I will always tell my kids like, how you were throwing this fit about not kicking the ball right. You see this kid wishes they had the opportunity to kick that ball.
Right.
And just kind of humble my child's mindset
Mhm.
of, yeah, maybe it's not so bad, right? Um, and
I use
so,
that same perspective in like workouts with I had a spin instructor. I think I told you about him, a spin instructor when I was younger who was the epitome of health, the healthiest man I knew, and was there, 5 days a week at the gym. Just very encouraging, motivational, took good care of himself, never smoked a cigarette in his life and randomly was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and, passed probably within 6 months. And I still think of him all the time when I don't want to push through a workout or because he would have given anything to stay and, like push himself again. Or like when he, got sick and had to stop, we did a ride in his honor, in his memory after he passed. And I still use him. There's like two songs that remind me of him. Um, and I used it in my class this week and I tell people to like, use that motivation too sometimes in your workout. Sometimes you got to fight for you. Sometimes you got to fight for, get through that workout to push through to like think about motivating or encouraging your kids or your spouse or someone that can't do this, that doesn't have that ability any
yeah,
longer. So um, I love that your heart, feels for them. And you've shared with me that, when you see these moms, and that's where you and I started connecting about my postpartum and my mental health struggle. And you're like, but I'm so concerned about these parents that if they don't have the right resources, if they're not taking care of themselves and getting
right.
support, and how are they pouring into their kiddos that are, like you just feel this big pull to like help people and help them, get to a place of thriving, not just surviving. Um, so we talked, we kind of contemplated like, what does it look like? I even asked you, I was like, do you want to do the podcast with me? I don't know. Or what are we supposed to do here? Um, so talk to me about that and just that pull and how you've, I know we don't have it figured out yet. I don't know my full purpose on this earth. I think you're starting to learn, and we talked about it early on about sharing your story has moved people and helped people in different ways. But what have you come to terms with in the last few years of like the reason, the purpose, how you can help? I mean, you said to be hope, right?
Yeah, I think it's to be hope. You know, in my small world, I try to be the best for my family and my friends that I can be.
Mhm.
I know I'm not perfect, and they might not always see it, but I have the intentions. Um,
And you
and
have
I,
to remember that, like I said, I shared earlier, you're always giving me reminders of things or verses to look at or things to think about. You're no doubt doing that for your kids and raising them. You don't know what they are going to go off and do and grow and become when they grow up. So you may
right.
be preparing someone that's going to make huge strides in support or, speaking on something like this, might help get your message heard by more people that might inspire hope. And just being able to relate. That's what this whole thing is about. Someone might, be like, oh my gosh, that's what my mom, went through with my own struggle, or, that makes sense in my journey, or give them that ultimate hope of heaven.
Yeah, throughout their lives, I always try to plant little seeds with everyone I know. But one of the things that I always tell my kids is the absolute most important relationship you'll ever have is with God.
Mhm.
Period, hands down. Nothing else truly matters, you know, in any significant way like that. And if you have that belief and faith in God, that will give you the best opportunity to have other meaningful relationships
Right.
in your life. Does not mean that they will all work out because the devil's always playing
Mhm.
his games and not everyone believes in God.
Right. Well, and
And
okay, I'm going to
therefore,
ask you that, like, so this hasn't been, I mean, my faith and some of my faith journey. And I do feel like, you were another seed kind of planted into my life right when I needed it. And I was seeking, we were new to Texas. We were starting to become involved in a church and really trying to find, where I was at in my faith journey. And I mean, I was always a believer, but what do you say to someone that's listening and is like, yeah, I'm not there? I actually had someone reach out to me after I got baptized and said, I'm kind of lost in my journey with faith. I'm curious how you got to this point, or like, where do you suggest someone start? I know you're probably going to say read the Bible, right? But that can feel overwhelming to someone. I remember going to a Bible study and being like, I don't know the Bible as well. I'm intimidated even to go. I mean, your story
yeah,
provides hope. That's why I want everyone to hear it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the obvious answer would be everyone needs to read the Bible.
Yeah,
But I think that you just have to be there for people. To be Christian is to be Christ-like.
right,
To be like is not to be the same. You'll never be the same.
right,
Jesus was perfection because he was God in the flesh, meaning he's the only one that ever had the potential to do it.
mm-hmm,
And so I think that you just have to pay attention to people, sense what they may need, and be there for them the best
right,
that you can, and show them that Christ-like is in you.
right.
They don't have to necessarily know, but I've had many, particularly young men that I've worked around and stuff like that in my life, that will see, some of the things I do how I behave, and they will say that's an inspiration.
Mm.
And what I tell them is, keep in mind I'm doing the best I can, but I still have my own struggles. I'm far from perfect.
Mhm.
And I always remind them of the story of Job. I go back to Job a lot.
Mhm.
And the only reason it worked out in the end was because he never gave up his faith in God. And your life will be sacrifice
And suffering.
and suffering. And so I think the answer is just be there for people.
I think that's the
And
perfect answer. And
and
it's
whenever they're asking for your advice, and this is what I do. If you ask me the advice, I'm going to give you the best answer that I can give,
right,
and I'm going to try to match it to the Bible the best I can.
right. I
So
love
I'm
that.
going to try to give the best biblical advice that I can from scriptures that I've read and remembered, and try to translate that into something that would be beneficial for you.
Hmm. That's great. And I think that really makes it simple to just say, be there for someone. For someone that hasn't grown up in faith and, or, has had some past hurt or struggle that they're like, they've pushed away from it. That's the ultimate experience. If you can sit with someone in the trenches, if you can be there for someone when they're, hurting or down, um, I feel like through that and connection, you're going to experience moments of faith in God without even, realizing it. Um,
Yeah,
and
you have to be there for them.
right, like
Right?
sit
It
in
can't
the
be about you,
trenches.
right?
Right.
It can't be about you. That's like I was speaking
Not
about at
for
the
show.
beginning of this is, my whole story. Part of the reason why I never shared it broadly
Hmm.
was because I didn't want anyone to think it was about me or me getting attention.
You make that so clear, though,
But
Shawn.
now I realize that it does need to be shared more broadly
Hmm.
because it could be the seed
Thousand
that
percent.
gets people to seek God.
Right. That
And
tiny little
if
mustard
that can
seed, right?
happen, once again, I want zero credit. I'm not trying to get any credit. Like I've told you before, if everyone on the planet watched this and someone offered, $1 billion, I would not want a cent of it.
Right.
Because if you read Matthew 7:23, it talks about some will come before me and I will say, go away, I do not know you.
Mm.
And they will say, but have I not prophesied in your name?
Mm.
And people get stuck on that. And sometimes with scripture, what you have to do is you can't just read the verse. You have to read verses before and verses after.
Right.
But what the people that will be told that are going to be the people that are trying to take credit,
Yeah.
because there is no one that goes to heaven without Jesus Christ.
Wow.
No one.
Right.
Only perfection is allowed in heaven. Without Jesus Christ, it's not possible. And so that is what that verse is saying. And so that's why I say, you know, God wants us to share the word.
Hmm.
And so I'm just trying to plant seeds. But I realize that I'm actually doing nothing but sharing what's been given to me by God Himself
Right. By
from the
experience.
Bible.
Well, I love all of that. I want to, quickly, I want to share a So I try with each guest with that word that I choose that kind of, I feel like encompasses what we're about to talk about. And like I told you earlier, I chose the word hope. Try to choose a song lyric or a quote or something that connects to that subject. And, I looked it up and kind of sat with different things this week. And Hebrews 11:1 jumped out at me. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. And I think that verse for me, I mean, yes, of course it holds the word hope in it, but I'm so honored that you shared your story with me in the first place. Um, because you've helped me grow my faith, you've helped me grow my hope. Um, but I just feel so blessed that I get to talk to someone that, I mean, you got to people might think, well, he got to see, he got to experience and go there and know what exists. But I asked you the last time we talked, I'm like, I forgot to ask you this originally. Did you see a face? Was it, could you describe it? And you said no, right? You
Yeah,
saw a hand.
you know, you knew you knew that it was God.
Mhm.
That's the only way I could. Was there a person? Yes, there was a person.
Yeah.
What in my mind was a person.
Mhm.
But just you look at the Apostle Paul, walking down the road, and the Spirit of Jesus
Mhm.
comes to him. We don't know. We presume that it comes to him in the form of man, right? There's different parts of the Bible that said, talks about angels
Mhm.
in their form, and then angels coming in the form of human.
Oh yeah.
And so, the thing is, at the end of the day, was there, what I thought as a person? Yes, but that's just God trying to make my mind capture, because God's everything,
Right.
right? And so, that's the only way I can explain it. It's you can't explain it unless you see it.
Right. The truth.
Um, but
And
also what I would say for people is motivation gets you started.
mhm.
Discipline is what keeps you going and moving forward. And so that is why I make an extreme effort every morning to start my morning off with scripture.
And that's in everything. It's in life, it's in work, it's in relationships.
Yeah.
Discipline is so important. Okay, so we like to end with some of the healing stuff. So obviously, you did a ton of healing through your surgeries, and I'm sure PT and rehab and all these things to get yourself back to the strong competitor that you are. But let's talk about, we also like to share like products or things. If there's something that you take or you a vitamin or something that you try to prioritize. Our last guest talked about magnesium. Um, that's something that, and me and my husband have been doing magnesium now for a few months to try to help with our sleep, and which helps me wake up earlier at 5:30 and not feel so out of control. But is there something that you would share, like a product or a tool, something that's helped you?
Yeah. So I actually think everyone should lift weights.
So important.
Um, the thing is, a lot of people want to lose weight and change their appearance, and they go to cardio.
Hmm.
Cardio burns calories. Cardio will make you more cardiovascular efficient, but it won't build
Right,
muscle, right? It'll make you a smaller version of yourself.
right.
So if you truly want to mold your body, now there's an argument to be said to sprinting. If you see sprinters, they have massive legs a lot of
Yes,
times. But that's different than traditional cardio.
right.
But if you really want to change your appearance, it's weightlifting.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to do like me and compete or any of those things. But weightlifting will do those things for you. There's been lots of research that I've done around depression,
Mm-hmm.
and weightlifting in some cases helps because you start to change your appearance. That
Right.
feels good. You get stronger. That feels good. People make compliments to you. That feels good. Just being motivated and active in general
Mm-hmm.
makes you feel good. Um,
One
there's
of,
lots of study around as we age.
yes.
The muscle building and everything that we do when we're younger will aid us in that
Right.
because as you work the muscles, it actually strengthens your bones.
Right.
And so that's one thing I would say that everyone needs to do.
I love it.
Um,
That's simple.
as
It's
far
not, you don't have
as
to go out and buy it. You just have to do it.
right, yeah,
Not a
yeah,
product that
just
you need to
for
purchase
sure.
weekly. Just
And
you purchase
then
you, right?
right. And then I would say, as far as supplements, you mentioned magnesium. Magnesium's a really good one. Magnesium helps with inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people struggle with high blood pressure. High blood pressure comes from inflammation of the blood vessels.
Mm-hmm.
And so, zinc is a really good one.
Okay.
That helps us not get sick as often.
Right.
Things like that. It also helps with some sleep and other things. And then vitamin D. A lot of people are vitamin D3 deficient.
Mm-hmm.
So I take vitamin D3 every day. Uh, Another one is creatine. I think everyone should take creatine.
Really?
It is one of the most widely studied supplements out there. And what it does essentially, there's much more technicality to it, but essentially, you're hydrating your muscles.
Mm.
And
One of my good girlfriends just this week told me that she takes creatine, and I was like
yeah,
curious what that is or what that's all about. But
yeah. And it's fairly inexpensive.
yeah,
And I
okay.
think everyone should take it, but it hydrates the muscles, and a hydrated muscle is less likely to be injured.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean it can't, but it's less likely.
that makes
And
sense.
they've actually found cognitive benefits
Okay.
to taking creatine daily, just 5 grams a day. Now, you can get caught up in marketing. Marketing, uh, with marketing comes expense.
Right.
And so it's a supplement that's been around for a long time. So just look for 100% pure creatine monohydrate.
Okay.
We sell it at Walmart.
Nice plug. I love that.
Um, but a great supplement.
Okay. I love that. Okay. I wanted to just share to kind of close here. We've only got a few minutes. The one of the things that when we talked, you shared your story, and um, I ended up telling you in our time together that actually, when I was young, I was at a pool party with some friends for a birthday. And so, again, in my mind, I was like, maybe this is why Chris connected us. Maybe, yeah, I mean, and I had not told Chris my story, and I didn't realize he didn't know your story. But I'm like, maybe this is why we're connecting because I was at this pool party. My mom we had my brother and I knew how to swim. I was out there with my friends and it was one of those pools where it was deep in the middle. And I walked out to the deep end with one of the girls who said, let's go out there and swim. Can you swim good? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we went out there. And as soon as we got over our heads, she started freaking out and trying to tread water and she couldn't. She was bobbing and she grabbed me and pushed my shoulders down to prop herself out of the water. And I remember trying to fight and kind of get out from underneath her, but I was underwater. And I remember just thinking, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to get up. So I could see a swimsuit of a girl on the side of the pool. And I just thought, I need to walk to her. I need to get, out of the deep end and just like settle myself down. And I went unconscious. And the girls like yelled for help. The mom whose house we were at was um, an EMT. So she, as soon as they screamed for her, she ran out, dove in the pool, pulled me out of the pool, resuscitated me. Um, and we lived across the street. So this was the neighbor's house. And, once I came to and was kind of settled down and okay, she walked me over to my mom's house to like tell my mom she just had this incident at the pool. And so she knocked on the door. My mom answered, and I said, she goes, "Oh, she just had this, incident in the pool. She went under. I had to pull her out and resuscitate her." And I said, "Mom, I saw grandpa." And she was like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, it was weird. There was a bright light and I saw grandpa. And I always thought, I know when I talked to you last time, I told you that it was my grandpa Mac, who was like my best, like it was a great grandpa of mine who was like, he was just my buddy. Like he loved me hard. That's what I thought it was that I saw. Um, but I was talking to my mom this morning, just kind of trying to remember the details of this story. And I'm like, okay, so we both had these near death experiences. Now, I was only probably unconscious for maybe a minute. And I came back too. So I remember just a bright light kind of being in a hallway. And, when I woke up, I told them that I saw grandpa and my throat hurt really bad from swallowing all the water. And I don't know if I threw up, when they pulled me out or not. But I asked my mom this morning, I'm like, how old was I when that happened? And she's like, well, you had to be 7 or 8. Like it was that year. Which I thought, I'm like, wow, that's actually crazy because that's how old Shawn was when he went through this. And it's hard when you hear your story and you're like, what does a 7-year-old remember? Or, how did you carry all that information back? And I look at my daughter who's 6, and I know you have young ones too. It's like, wow, she's like about the age that I was when I went through this. Um, so all that to say, I just think it's unique that we both had these experiences. Mine was much shorter experience than yours. And what my mom told me today, she's like, no, you said grandpa, and I said his name. I saw grandpa Richard, who I barely knew because he passed when I was 4 or 5. So it wasn't Grandpa Mac, my like buddy, my pal, that she's like, no, he passed away a year or two later. I don't know why you had that in your mind that was, who it was. She's like, no, it was dad's dad, who you didn't really have much of a relationship with. And there's like this part of you, of course you get to a point with any struggle in life where you can be grateful for the experience that led you to, and grateful for the tragedy that led you to grow. But I'm like, I wish I would have heard more. I wish I would have known more or gotten more of a message from him. Or, I just feel so blessed that you've been able to share so much of what you did. And I hate that you went through that experience, but I'm so grateful to hear your story and to be able to share it with so many others.
Yeah, and I would say, I'm not sorry that I went through it.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest but most amazing things that I could imagine.
Right.
And so, again, I reiterate suffering and sacrifice. There's been a lot of suffering, but
Right.
I've got to meet God.
Right. Like, wow.
God told me about some of my future that I remembered later, and what will always stick out in my head. I remember it all like it happened yesterday. But what will always stick in my head is the introduction was I am,
Mhm.
no questions asked, step out of the dark into the lightness, I am, and at the end, seek in me.
Yep. I love that. Thank you so much, Shawn, for sharing everything today. I appreciate it so much. And I loved all of your advice, your takeaways. Um, and I just encourage everybody, maybe this message, you feel confident in your faith, you'll feel comfortable in your beliefs. Maybe this message that you're hearing today might be for someone else. Maybe it's meant to be passed on to someone that needs it. Maybe it's meant to encourage you to sit there in the trenches with someone who needs it. Maybe it's encouraging you to create that consistency um, in your schedule and your routine, thinking about spirit, mind, and body. But just, thank you, Shawn, for the hope that you shared with us today.